But the good part is Rajesh Ahuja, who's with us. I have known Rajesh for a while, and we have exchanged a lot of notes on the talent acquisition industry. So Rajesh has spent more than 2 decades in what is popularly called the TA function, full form of talent acquisition. Currently, is the vice president global TA for Johnson Controls, but has spent a lot of years in technology and a lot of years in banking, right, in the TA function itself. And Rajesh, just getting right into the topic, and I know we talked about it a bit earlier also, right? Your experience over the last 2 decades in the TA function has spanned 3 continents, right? Asia, Europe, and North America now, right? And as you were joking, this is almost 80% of the world's population, right? So you pretty much spanned a lot of talent. You've seen a lot of talent across technology, across banking, financial services. Uh, so what are a couple of the things that are differences, right? If you look at talent, say at mid or junior level first, we'll come to the senior level later. In say Asia versus say Europe and now in North America.
Uh, just Gautam, thanks for having me. Very excited to be here. Uh, and Gautam, uh, I think we can probably talk for 2 hours on just that question. But let me kind of share my experience on what I have seen in terms of talent and differences between the various geographies. Uh, you know, Asia is pretty diverse, but if you look at India and China as the two big populations or two big talent markets, uh, they are relatively newer talent markets from the world's industrial growth perspective, right? Uh, 30, 40 years at best, if you count the China's rise in the last few decades, and probably about 25 years in India. Not saying that prior to that they didn't have the talent markets, but talent markets as we know them today, be it in technology industry, be it in the modern engineering, be it in the some of the newer disciplines as they are growing and becoming more popular. While the rest of the world, especially the Western world, both European as well as the American world, is much older, both in terms of the way technology adoption has happened, the maturity of business processes, the maturity of talent practices, and so on and so forth. Second big difference is there is a significant demographic differences in these 3 continents, be it in terms of the age, be it in terms of education, be it in terms of urbanization, be it in terms of access to internet, and so on and so forth, right? And those things make a huge difference when it comes to the talent readiness, especially at the junior and the middle level, the quality of education, the maturity of university ecosystems, the maturity of non-education based trainings which are available to people to get into the workforce. Last but not the least, uh, the ambition levels are different. And what I mean by that, if you combine the economic and the demographic needs for people, the ambition level in China and India amongst the middle class and the lower middle class are at very, very high levels because they have reason to be successful to come out of the economic conditions they are in and get into a better quality and standard of life. While in the Western world, that is not a challenge anymore. It was probably a challenge 150 years ago, or maybe after the Second World War, but in Europe specifically, but not no longer in the modern world. And and because of these contextual differences or changes, I think we have uh, big differences in the work ethic. We have the big differences in on what parameters of life the workforce wants to pay attention and importance to, and how much, for example, uh, one of my favorite topics is how much learning people are still dedicating their time to. are people reinventing themselves? Because we all know the half life of a skill. I'm sorry, half life of a skill is reducing consistently, right? It's 4 years now. It's predicted to be 3 years in very short periods of time. You would see people in Asia putting a huge emphasis on continuous learning, be it second degrees, third degrees, be it doing certificate courses, be it doing whatever else, to constantly equipping them for what's coming their way. You don't see that so often in Western world because a cost of training is high, and also people tend to acquire a set of skills and go with them for a certain longer period. Second, uh, I I think mobility, right? The ambition brings the the need for making changes, adapting to the circumstances around you. Uh, if you see United States, the last 50 year, the mobility of talent within United States has consistently come down year on year. This is Department of Labor statistics. If you look at it, uh, so people's readiness to move for jobs or move for opportunities is coming down. While in the Asian society, it's very common for people to move out of their small towns and villages to go to big cities and work and make a life out of it, or move internationally. So areas like that are constituting huge differences. There's a favorite author of mine, Dr. Parag Khanna out of Singapore. He talks about the Asian century, or the world is going to be brown or something like that, he says. And not that I subscribe to that fully, but essentially these are the big demographic dividends which he highlights towards the Asian society. However, I'm a big fan of the work ethic, the way the workforce is able to organize themselves, individual productivity levels, and the seriousness towards getting an output is much better in the Western society as compared to what I have experienced in the Asian economy.
Very interesting. Couple of points I want to just pick up on uh, ambition and demographics, right? Two things that you talked about as one, as points of differences. Do you think that is responsible for economies or industries in Asia having higher employee turnover? You think that is why the attrition levels are higher there as compared to, say, Europe or North America, or are the other reasons? What has been your experience there? Because I'm sure, I mean, attrition is such a big topic, right? Employee turnover
Yeah.
is such a huge topic in the HRTA function.
So the world just came out of the Great Resignation, right, in 2021, and I, I agree. Ambition is a big reason for employee turnover in the Asian, both India and China. Uh, Traditionally, the attrition levels have been high, at least for last decade and a half. More important in the post-COVID era. But there is also another element, which is, I think the talent demand in these economies is much higher than the local talent is able to fulfill. Now, it's a nuanced argument because you would say the world's largest supply of talent is in these two economies. So how can there be a talent shortage? I think there is a big gap between talent availability and the quality of talent which is available to do your today's work. And one area where Asian economies need to do, or education system needs to step up, is how do you bridge the gap between education and employability? I think there is a significant gap. You can get a graduate, but that graduate may or may not be immediately employable in some of the modern industry. So some of the employers I have worked for literally had anywhere between 3 months to 6 months worth of full-time classroom training for graduates coming out of different schools, for them to be ready to start working on their own on a project or on a deliverable. And that's a big gap, which, yeah, so that's So while there is a demand, the supply is not keeping up. The quality supply is not keeping up, and hence you would find the opportunities in the short run going up, which causes attrition, which causes wage inflation, which causes all those other nice problems in those economies. Uh, the other challenge is, of course, ambition, right? The demographics of having too many young people means there are lesser role models in the society, and there are lesser set norms in the society for people to follow. And obviously, there is a bit of a rebellion in every young society, which I guess is always good.
Well, I've got so many questions. Maybe just a level set. Can you? I just want to give people a sense of scope of your experience that you're making these observations. Can you talk about how many staff Infosys is and how many people you guys would hire there annually? How many staff Johnson Controls is? How many people you're hiring there annually?
Both the companies are large, uh, 20 billion plus kind of revenues. Infosys is much larger in terms of employee population because of the nature of industry it is in. It's about 300 and close to about 350,000, slightly lesser, but give or take 350,000 people. Uh, Growing at pretty healthy rates. In the last 2 years or 3 years, the growth rates have been 10, 20%, 15%, 8, 10%. So pretty significant growth rates. Johnson Controls on the other side is about 100,000 people, growing pretty well. Different nature of business, so obviously the headcounts are different. But both these companies, which are my last two companies, but prior to that, if I look at Credit Suisse or Deutsche or those kind of banks, again, fairly global, large organizations, very distributed in terms of their presence and the kind of work they do in different parts of the world. So I've spent about 25 years in the human resources field. A lot of it is in talent acquisition in terms of hiring large number of people, but also in managing and growing teams. One highlight of my experience has been I've worked for large companies, but in the parts which were growing rapidly, or we were setting up new countries and things like that. So that there was always that exciting part of the business which I was part of. Way back. Uh, Slight digression, but way back, my first job was with Toyota when Toyota re-entered India as a big auto giant, and I was part of the first few people who joined the organization from groundbreaking till the first car got produced and the 50,000th car got produced and so on and so forth, right? So it's always been exciting, and hence I have been able to observe uh, talent functions, organization growth, how global organizations look at talent in different parts of the world, how people come together in one large organization to contribute to the bigger picture. So being a student of all of that, and hence, even if I'm slightly bold in my observations, that's where they come from.
Yeah. I get to interview so many entrepreneurs that are experiencing rapid growth, and they're realizing how much, even though everybody's been talking to them about people their whole career, it's like finally actually becoming real. Like, oh wow, we are going to make this or not, depending on our people, and it's like they're becoming less and less important to the equation, and it's more about who are we getting on this team. Um, what advice do you have for rapidly growing businesses that are starting to get, whether it's into the hundreds millions or into the billions, and this is becoming like a significant part of their problem as a CEO, where maybe it hadn't been in years past?
A great question, and I've seen some of that. I think the first thing the entrepreneurs or the CEOs need to acknowledge the skills required as an organization or as a company from going 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and 10 to 100 or 1,000 are very different set of skills. And one of the biggest lessons I have seen entrepreneurs or CEO missing out on is what made them successful from 0 to 1 or 1 to 10 is the same skills which are going to take them to 1 to 100. And that's where probably the biggest mistake happens. And we've seen this there are enough examples of this in the industry. Great ideas, great start, and then things don't go as planned, or people the entrepreneurs are fired by the boards and professional CEOs are brought in to manage the next set of journey. That's one. And what are those skills? I think innovation, break the barriers, challenge everything. Uh, no idea is a bad idea. Fail fast. All of that really works for 0 to 1, 1 to 10, because you're exploring the new world. You're trying to get your idea established. Your first client, your second client. Uh, you know, uh, One classic example is Uber. Uber did everything. It was a great idea. Did everything to make it successful, right? But didn't realize that what they were doing in that everything to make it successful, they were also breaking some rules without knowing, but they were still challenging everything in a way that they were crossing a line which they should not have. But when it comes to 10 to 1,000 or 10 to infinite growth, you need process orientation, you need compliance, you need controls, you need governance, which are all antithesis to what made you successful in the first place. And hence the balance, right? Because you still want those good things in your organization. You still want to behave like a startup. You still want the great ideas to come from your organization. You still want managers to feel empowered to make the change. But you also need control and you also need governance. You don't want the hell to break loose, in the morning when the newspapers come up and there's something terribly gone wrong. So you need a mature set of people in the room or in your board or in your executive team who have probably seen some of this and been there, done that, but who still are driven and are happy with growth, who still get up in the morning saying, what next for the organization. So that's the mix you're really looking for. Very successful people who are still ready to challenge the status quo, but in a way that they're not breaking it, they're building on top of it. I think that's mature thinking is probably the number one attribute or number one skill you need in the board or in the exec teams when they're growing and growing fast. Second, I think risk management, which is part of mature thinking, but it's a full-fledged discipline, right? Not saying don't take risks, but how do you manage risks very well is a skill which most of the CEOs need to bring in. Third, which is, in my view, the continuum, you need a phenomenal CHRO who is not ready, who's not afraid of calling the CEO, saying you're wrong. This might cost us a lot more than what you're thinking. And hence, somebody who CEO is able to respect, is able to rely on for advice, but at the same time is able to manage the CHRO also, because ultimately CHRO is going to report into the CEO. So I think that's the third skill. Most of the successful CEOs would either bring sales, marketing, product, financial skills already on the table. So I'm not going to be a stupid guy to suggest them that they need to bring that, but they need to bring people who think differently than them. Last but not the least, I think most of the CEOs need to learn from some of the most successful CEOs in the world. Stop taking them too seriously, and be happy with not doing enough work, in not having enough day job, but have enough time to think, reflect, and manage the 4 or 5 people they work with. They need to be comfortable not doing things with their own hands, and in technology will get into the code and break it. Don't do that. So I think that's probably the lessons I would give from whatever I've seen.
Well, I love those answers, and I'm seeing Gautam with a huge smile. So I'm going to hand it off to you, Gautam, because I know you've got questions.
Yeah, because it's I can identify with so much of what Rajesh is saying, right? That 0 to 1 and that 1 to 10. I'm sure Jess. So you're looking at your own experience, right? Being on the entrepreneurial path, right? These things are, and I think mature thinking and managing risk. I mean, that was great, Rajesh. I think that's really something. And getting that balance right is really where it's tough. But staying on this path and just adding another question to what Jess is saying, I'm sure you have seen a lot of startups emerge in the TA space, right? In the last, say, 10, 15 years, right? I won't go beyond 15 because, it's basically been a 15-year or 20-year story. Just walk us through some of those differences that you're seeing today, right? And I'm sure a lot of people pitch to you in various, as a buyer, maybe even as an advisor, maybe as an investor, I don't know. And just walk us through some of those differences that you are seeing today as compared to what you were seeing maybe 6, 7, or even 10 years ago, primarily in the HR tech, TA tech startup space.
If you look at HR as a whole and TA as a subset, I think majority of what you saw as startups or service providers or even new service providers was largely people-based solutions. Somebody came and said, your mess for less, you have 100 recruiters, I can do it for 80 because my recruiters are smarter than yours. Or, I will do it out of India, or I will do it out of Philippines, or I will do it out of Costa Rica. And so I can do your mess for less, people arbitrage. I have more learning in my team, and et cetera, right? So all that good stuff. Somewhere along that line, slowly the tech started coming in where people said, okay, I can do better automation than you. I can do, I can do better searches than you. I can do, because I use better technology, and my recruiters are better trained on doing Boolean searches than yours, and small tech, but meaningful. Nowadays, at least in the last 2 years, I don't think so any startup comes and leads with, I have better people. Everybody comes and leads with, I have better technology. I have new technology. I have a platform. I have done this. This is my, so tech is leading conversation on startup in the HR and TA space as compared to people. And my personal opinion is neither is right. I think you need a good balance between the two. You need to lead with tech, but good tech is only good if it is used by good people, right? So you cannot have good tech alone solving the problem unless, what I've been reading since morning, the Google gentleman who quit the organization saying, bots will be more intelligent than humans.
Yeah.
So let's wait for that. But as of today, what I know is you need good people and good tech combination. The other thing which has changed in my view in the startup space is you actually have a lot of really good people in HR tech and TA tech startups these days, which was not the case 15 years ago. 15 years ago, either retiring CHROs were going to start something on their own, or young people who wanted to challenge something and who wanted to build something was starting something, right? Now, a lot of interdisciplinary entrepreneurs are coming into this space. People who have only tech backgrounds, people who have only HR background, people who have consumer background and sales and marketing, and so on and so forth are coming together to create. So there's a lot of new, fresh thinking in the space, which I'm very excited about. Gautam, you are one such example, right? What you guys are trying to do is different. I don't think so it was attempted before at this level of sophistication and global scale. So this is very exciting space today.
That's good to hear, because I think this is one area, if you look at TA tech or HR tech, which has always lagged behind. You had fintech, retail tech, health tech, right? And as a TA stroke HR person, I used to always have this, where is my function, right?
Yeah.
It was never there. It was always, somewhere.
And surprisingly, it's a big business, right? HR tech is quote unquote 30-40 billion dollar business in the market size, which is substantial from any technology focused business spend.
No, I think it's interesting what you said, that you're finding many more different kind of people getting into HR tech stroke TA tech. I think that, if you ask me, is a good insight.
One such gentleman recently spoke to me who was probably what Jess does. mergers, acquisitions, private markets, and then they decided that 3 or 4 of them decided that TA and TA technology is probably what they want to do next, because you know
You're giving ideas
they
to Jess.
their logic was, most of the company's limiting factor is talent, and if you're able to play in that area, we would be able to make something out of it. Completely agree.
So Jess, that's your next venture.
Seriously. Well, Rajesh, I'm just thinking about the future of this industry. I'm so glad Gautam brought up the tech and the changes. For those of us that don't get to spend all day, every day doing this, and certainly not at your level. I mean, the 350,000 person organizations, 100,000 person organizations, like, all of the top vendors are hitting you up. You're seeing the latest and greatest all the time. For the rest of us who don't get to do that, what's on the cusp? Like, what's coming in the next 2-3 years that maybe not everyone else realizes how big an impact it's going to have?
I think it's already here. I don't think so we'll need 2-3 years. I think the whole generative AI, large scale language models, the chat GPTs, the Bard, the whatever else of the world, they're already here. And I have become a big convert. I've used machine learning models in TA to do analytics and things like that, but that wasn't really the aha moment for me. The aha moment has been generative AI. And I'll just give you a simple example. I use one of the tools. I recently started my new role. So I said, okay, let's test this. I asked one of the tools to write my own job description. Right? I've just write me a job description for global head of talent acquisition for Johnson Controls. It wrote it, and to be honest, it was pretty neat job description, right? As a first pass, it was better than what I would write myself. Because I would start copy pasting things from here and there. So it's, good first this thing. Then I asked it to modify parts of it, kind of came out well. Then I said, okay, compare it with top 3 competitors of mine. What are the good and bads about this job at Johnson Controls, specific this thing. 1 minute, I had a really neat summary with tables on what's good, what's not good as comparison. Now, just imagine if I'm a search consultant and if I am trying to convince a good candidate to come and look at this job, and I have these tools at my hand, instead of having a researcher trying to put all this together from their limited understanding of each of the competitors, there is a pretty good output for you to go and start speaking to. Now, this is 0.01% of the possibilities, right, or the art of possible. If I look at it, I think a whole bunch of functions are going to get transformed in a very, very short periods of time, provided the world gets answers on data privacy and cybersecurity and all of that good stuff. But a whole bunch of functions are up right there between now and next probably 24 months are going to get disrupted and changed forever. Now, that's the good part. The productivity is going to go up, the accuracy is going to improve, the businesses are going to get some amazing benefits of productivity. But I think the society is going to struggle with what it brings. If bots are intelligent enough to replace people at a very, very alarming rate, then the unemployment issue will be such a big thing to tackle with that I don't think so us as a society have an answer right now. And as usual, typically the technology always is ahead of the governments and the regulators and rest of the people who control the larger world. So that's probably going to create some level of conflict very soon. And like Sundar Pichai said, it's already here. So you and I cannot wish it away. You and I cannot think that it's not here or it'll come 5 years later. It's here. And when the humanity has a tool in hand, they're going to use it. So I think we should be worried, but equally super excited about the fact that our worlds are going to change very, very quickly.
Well, I really like that answer. It reminds me of a a very good book with a very funny title by an economist named Paul Pilzer called Why God, or I think it's called God Wants You to Be Rich. Okay.
Yeah.
and it's this idea of like how specialization ultimately adds to the economy, but but causes pain in the time of the the gap of reskilling,
Yep.
and there's I agree with you. There's going to need to be some answers there. Maybe my follow-up question there, because AI is such a hot topic. We Gautam and I were talking earlier today about my business partner Nick keeps, like, on almost daily basis, adds another AI tool to our processes and stuff. And when everybody has AI and things like what you're talking about become best practice, what kind of advice do you have for organizations who are still trying to differentiate, knowing their competitors are writing their job descriptions with AI as well?
Have great people to front end the conversations. Uh, People join people. People don't join companies. People work with people. People don't work with bots alone, right? And all of us are social animals. We need that human interaction. And you know, you're in the financial services industry. How many times would you look into the eyes of a person and make a deal rather than just looking at a piece of data and information and make the deal, right? And I think that is irreplaceable. That empathy, that ability to sit together and solve a problem, that creativity which flows when people are trying to do things together, that laughter, that whole humanness to it is going to make a difference. So the companies which are going to retain that humanness, that ability to put real people and have real conversations, are going to differentiate themselves actively from everybody. Like uh, in 90s or in 90s and 2000s, having an SAP was a big aspirational thing in your organization, and then somewhere down the line everybody had SAP, right? So then it became, do I have a better financial analyst than your financial analyst on top of SAP? I think we're going to come to the same level, that everybody would have the same toolkit, but is my human better than your human to use the toolkit than you're not? And ultimately, we'll all still need to come together and do something, right? Even if the government starts sending me a free check every month, I would still need to do something, right? So, and I think that's the humanness which organizations need to retain.
I love that answer. Gautam, I know that you are a firm believer in the human and technology combination. What's that bringing up for you?
No, I was just very intrigued by Rajesh, for what you're saying, that hire better people, right? Put them in front, right? And again, coming back a bit on the TA side, like, so would you say that the professional of tomorrow, and maybe not tomorrow, professional of today, because as you rightly said, AI is already here, right? It's not going to come next year or next week. Probably the professional of tomorrow, the one key differentiator would be how he or she adopts a tool, right? Because as you rightly said, tools are available for everyone, right? And
Yep.
they will only get better and better, right? Even if you look at TA or HR tech or any function for that matter,
Yep.
sales, marketing, right? So probably then what it would be, that if you want to shine in your function, right, then you need to be able to be tool savvy, right? And if one goes from there, in your experience, how has that been? Like, are you seeing more professionals, and may not be only TA but professionals across, right, adopting tools? What about the slightly people who are not grown up with the internet, right? People who grew up without the internet, and there was a generation like that, right? What about that? Are you seeing that that's becoming almost like a necessity in your job? Like, you have to be tool savvy to really succeed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not just tool savvy. I think you need to start thinking about how tools are going to make your job better, and how you as a professional need to change. And I'll classically give you an example, right? Uh, my dad grew up in a generation where there was no internet. There were no phones. Forget internet. Right? There were no landline phones when he grew up in 60s and 50s and whatever not. Right? Today he's a extremely active user of his phone with internet, be it simple things like making international calls over one of those messaging platforms, or doing his banking transactions, and so on and so forth. And he self-taught himself. It's not that he had to be taught that. The only reason he self-taught himself was when he was, for example, when he was walking into a bank branch, he was not getting the answers he was looking for. And if those answers were coming from his phone, he said, why do I need to waste my time there, right? If I can do this sitting at home. And mind you, he went through his mistakes, right? He almost lost a bunch of money because somebody very nicely did a phishing attack on him, and all of that stuff, right? So people will go through that learning curve and get there. But I think the learning curve is going to be shortened and shortened and shortened, because these days adoption of technology, especially for generation which is even as old as you and I are, who did not start with an iPhone, or who did not start when the internet was all prevailing, uh, are pretty good with using it. But the generation which is now getting into the workforce, or which has got into the workforce over the last few years, is the iPhone generation, right? Because they very soon, the kids who were born after 2007 are going to get into workforce, who have seen an iPhone in their living memory all their lives. And hence the way they behave and think and do everything is different. So for them, adapting to tools is not going to be a challenge. For them, the challenge would be, can they think beyond the tools and use the tools the way they are supposed to get used, right? My daughter thinks every screen is a touch screen. That's how her basic thinking is. She does not think that the screens can be non-touch screen, right? That's a difference. And the world is still very diverse. It comes to when it comes to the amount of technology available, the amount of resources available, and so on and so forth. That's one, right? The second point, I think, which is extremely important, is how do organizations govern technology usage in the organizations? You and I, outside of our organizations we work, we are used to consumer grade technology, the Googles and the Apples and the Microsofts of the world. They work really, really well. And then you go inside a company and try and do a transaction. The experience is not great in most of the companies in the world, right? And there is a big dissonance which happens between your personal usage of technology versus the corporate usage of technology. And the organizations need to start thinking that if there are great tools available, how do I bring them in without having to go through a major pain for the users in the organization? So the good companies will be able to employ people if they allow them to use great tools. So tools will also become part of your attraction toolkit when it comes to getting good people to work for, or the ability to change the toolkit to use and become more effective. So I think the organizations will also have to think a lot about how they adapt to technology, how they allow employees to use technology. Today, for example, it's not an easy decision for organizations to allow using ChatGPT to every employee, because there are a lot of unknowns around it, and there are a lot of grave unknowns around it. So how do you manage that? But every employee wants to use ChatGPT because it's making my life easier. So there is a big dissonance, which is early stages, but it's going to come. So I think governance of technology, governance of tools, adaptation of tools is going to be also a big area of work for a lot of companies to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, governance would be very important. I think, yes, we're nearing time. Any wrap up comments from your end? Any other questions?
Yeah, well, hopefully you'll indulge me on this one, Gautam. I want to take a right turn. So, Rajesh, Gautam might be guessing what I'm going to talk about, but I'm talking to a couple of guys who grew up in India, who are killing it on the East Coast of the United States. Okay, and over 800 and something, almost I think we're getting closer to 900 episodes I've done so far. I have a massive overrepresentation of folks out of India who are just excelling around the world. And so it's become like a fascination of mine. I told the Gautam, I think I'm going to write a book called like Incredible Indians or something, and just like take all these interviews. So
By the way, that title is taken.
so I'm interested to you when you think about the advantages of growing up in India and doing business around the world, and you've been on multiple continents. Here in the US, you're doing extremely well. What kind of advantages do you think come from growing up in India?
I think either Satya Nadella or Sundar Pichai became the CEO. One of the two. One became earlier and the second followed, right? I think Sundar Pichai followed Satya Nadella. I think so. I may be wrong. I was invited on BBC Radio in London to talk about exactly the same thing. So, so, so I have a bit of an advantage on this answer. But
Yes, it is beat you to the question.
I think two or three things. One, the large parts of Indian society is educated middle class, and middle class can mean very different things in India, from people who are living on month-to-month salaries and they're not borrowing, but they're still living on month-to-month salaries, to people who are saving decently well to have an overseas holiday once in a year or once in 2 years or things like that, right? So it could mean anything. But the only way all of us knew that we can move upwards in our quality of life or quality of living was education. That if you study well, you would have a path to earn more and make your life better. So that's one. So studying was ingrained in the kids who were born in 70s or 80s, right? That there was no other option. That and parents would mortgage a lot of their valuables to get their kids through the college, right? So it was as important. The downside was, or the negative point was, there was no other option. If I didn't study, I had no other option. I would struggle to make a living. I would do some really cheap, lower level jobs, which would be very difficult for me to survive or make a decent living, right? So that there was this this thing. Second thing, when we grew up, the 70s, 80s kids, when they grew up, internet happened. And the Indian economy opened up to foreign investments, foreign jobs, and things like that, right? Now, internet has been a great equalizer in the world. We all know that. Suddenly, what was so distant and different was no longer so distant and so different. So suddenly there was this big wave of internet technology, Indian economy opening up, which kind of provided a platform for those kids who were studying and studying hard to do something with it. Third, I think the West is gone through a little bit of uh, disengagement with education and disengagement with hard work because of because of the economic prosperity it's enjoyed over a long periods of time, and hence, you know, when you do not have that very hungry middle class, you tend to lose the sight of hard work and things like that. So people, you know, all of us, I'm sure Gautam, you did, and I'm sure a bunch of people we didn't mind working 12 hours a day for the first 10 years of our life without thinking about it, because that's how life was, right? We just did what we had to do to get there. And I think that even today, the number of Indians in IT industry who are on a call at 10 o'clock in the night and they're from their, while having dinner with their family is not nice, but it's there, right? So people are available to do the job which needed to be done or which needs to be done. And the last bit, I think we are very frugal still as a society, so we still save, we still invest, we still study, and I think that kind of carries on. That tradition carries on. I I have been living outside of India for better part of my 25 years of my work life, but I think I still would want my kids to study. May not be the same way as my parents made me study, but I still want my kids to do, couple of degrees so that they have a standing in their life to do something with it, right? How right or wrong I am, I don't know. Time will tell. But I think these are the factors, in my opinion, which is continuing to fuel the growth of Indians. And plus, we are too many of us, right? So,
Okay, I'm going to add something, and Gautam, I'm going to get, because we're going to wind up here. I'm going to give you the chance to add your thoughts. I think I love everything you just said, and I want to see the other thing. You guys are so friendly and optimistic, and I think that goes a long ways. I love having people who grew up in India on the show, because so often there's just, like you said, you don't have as much of this victim mentality that is plaguing so much of at least US and Canada, of the everyone's done it to me, how come they didn't provide for me, which just feels like an anchor on productivity. And so it's so refreshing to be like, well, I'm going to do it, and we're going to make it happen, and we're okay with some failures. And I'm like, I want my kids.
We're still best friends with British, right?
Yeah, I want my kids to hang out with your kids, so hopefully it'll rub off on them. So those are two things I'm going to add is just welcomingness and friendliness and optimism. Gautam, anything that Rajesh and I missed?
No, I would just round it up with hunger, right? I think what Rajesh was talking about, and some of what you're saying, Jess, I think hunger is high, like the desire, the ambition, right, to excel or to really do well, right, and that I think propels a lot of people, right, and ultimately, if you have intrinsic hunger, right, then that's enough, right? You'll always keep wanting to do something rather than just not doing anything, right? And I think that pretty much would be the only thing I can add. But yeah. That was a great insight, actually, Rajesh. Even despite being an Indian myself, some of the things I never realized the internet piece, actually. I think the internet was a big thing, right?
Big leveler. Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head. If the internet had not happened, the year it did happen, the mid 90s, I think it would have been very, very different. That I think just leveled the whole field. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, just I'm out of questions unless.
This is great, Rajesh. Thank you so much for doing this. This has been a blast.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, this was fun.